Hey everyone, this is the Rewriter writing in. For today's video, I will be covering the unwritten story of Batman Sabbath. This game looked pretty strange, with concept art of characters such as Gorilla Grodd and White Rabbit being especially weird for a Batman title. Now, I want to make this point as it's crucial to this story. This game was heavily rumored to be an Arkham Knight sequel, but this was never 100% confirmed, nor were any plot details revealed about it. So, because of these factors, I took a lot of liberties with this story and am treating it as an Elseworlds tale, not an Arkham game. So don't be thrown off when I add some pretty radical ideas. This allows me to be a lot more creative because I'm not bound by the muddy Arkham timeline. Plus, I just really don't like Arkham Knight's ending, and I'd rather not make a sequel to that mess. I'm going to implement the characters that were shown in the concept art for this story, as well as adding a few more. Finally, before we get to the story, if you enjoy this video and the content on this channel, please consider leaving a like and subscribing. It really helps my channel grow. So with all this being said, let's dive into the unwritten story of Batman Sabbath. My name is Damian Al Ghul, heir of Ra's al Ghul, and now the Demon's Head. I've spent my entire life fighting for the League, training from the age of 3 to replace my grandfather when the day came for me to become the Demon's Head. I have been told that since training began, I am destined for greatness, and that the League is my birthright. My grandfather's mission with the League has always been to wipe the earth clean and start again. A noble goal at first glance, as criminals run rampant in the world, but global genocide is radical. What is a kingdom if there are no people in it to lead? I thought I would have years before I'd have to discover the answer to this personal dilemma, but come nightfall on March 30th, 2039, my life changed forever. The day began as everyone previously, morning meditation, followed by lectures and leading into training exercises. These included offensive and defensive exercises challenging not only our physical ability, but our mental as well. As expected, I excelled in every course, quickly making my way to the top of each class I was in. More often than not, this would come at the cost of my fellow students, who were exploited by me if they didn't have what it took to get to the top. This was the harsh reality of the life that I was born into, kill or be killed, and I grabbed onto this construct and never looked back. Even within the League's own ranks, I had more enemies than allies, which would soon bring about the end of everything. Upon returning to my quarters for the evening, I discovered a note on the table, indicating that my time had come. My hands began to sweat as I took one off the paper, revealing a colorless, odorless poison coating. I had only minutes to retrieve a special blend of herbs and mix them together. I reached under a drawer and into a hidden lockbox and began mixing. My stamina started to decrease as I fell to the floor and had to crawl over to the box to finish the concoction. I ripped a plant out of a vase and threw the mix into the water as soon as possible, choking it down as I lay on the ground, my vision blurred and in a full sweat. After a moment of laying on the ground, my strength gradually returned, and I went out to the balcony to signal to the watchmen of my attack, but they weren't there. Even the flames within the towers were unlit. The sky was clear as the trees gently waved in the breeze, until the silence was interrupted by a shuriken ripping through the curtain. I turned around in time to dodge the shuriken as 2 assassins began to rush me. One threw a rope dart at me that I grabbed and pulled, hurtling him towards me as I extended my leg out, kicking him in the face. The other pulled out a knife and began to swing at me, but I used a book on my dresser to block an incoming stab, lodging the blade into the book. I pulled the blade out and cut at the ninja until I found a weakness in his defense and stabbed him in the heart. The second ninja got back to his feet and threw multiple shurikens that I mostly dodged, except for one that got into my leg. I ripped it out as soon as I could as the ninja threw a smoke bomb that clouded the room. Closing my eyes, I used the faint sounds of his footsteps to guide me towards him. I jerked my head to the right as his arm flew to my left, and I grabbed him, throwing him over my shoulder and using the momentum to break his neck. As the smoke started to dissipate, I looked around the room to see the ninjas dead, and my room torn to pieces. I slammed open my door and peering down the hallway of the sanctuary, seeing more dead bodies. This isn't just an attack on me. They're targeting the League. My first instinct was to get to my mother and grandfather, warn them of the attack since the sirens weren't ringing. As I ran from my sanctuary to the monastery, the roar of helicopters and the glare of searchlights fell on our compound as their doors began to open and they started to rain gunfire upon us. Soldiers descended from ropes and began opening fire on everyone they saw. Everything was happening so fast, and yet my objective was clear: get the women and children to safety. I sprinted to the armory, quickly grabbing limited supplies that I could, while also putting light armor on and running back out there. By now, the once peaceful compound was erupting in a blaze as women were screaming and ninjas were defending their home from the invaders. I ran to a group of traitorous ninjas, slashing them down in fury while also dispatching invaders. Our loyal rank of ninjas were being cut down by the traitors, and the compound was falling under enemy hands. Our enemies were converging on the Lazarus Sanctum, and as I got there, I saw my grandfather and mother battling a horde of traitorous ninjas and mercenaries. I rushed to their aid, calling out to them. Grandfather shouted for me to get the helpless out of here. They weren't going to be able to hold them off very long. I answered that I wouldn't leave them, not until I knew they were safe. Grandfather spun a knife in his hand and threw it at me. I dodged it as it landed into a mercenary's head. He pointed for me to get out and help the women and children. That's an order. I nodded my head and ran to the women and children, who were hiding out in the armory. I led them through a secret tunnel that brought them outside of the compound into the beach, where they boarded multiple small boats. I told them to go, while I went back to my grandfather and mother. I sprinted up the steps to the Lazarus Sanctum, seeing my mother being stabbed in the back by a ninja. I screamed and ran over to her, but as I got close, the sanctum exploded. Lazarus spewed out of the doorway as flames engulfed the sanctum, sending me flying back. As my vision was blurred, I could only faintly make out the choppers above me as they started to send down missiles on the compound. I crawled to an underground entrance point and waited, slowly losing consciousness. Hours later, I awoke and popped open the hatch, seeing the ruins of the once beautiful compound. All the lush greenery was replaced with ashes. The stairs leading up to the sanctum had cracked in half as burned bodies lay scattered everywhere. I saw the burned, yet still recognizable armor of my grandfather and rushed over to him. Incredibly, he was still breathing, but faintly, as his life was slowly being taken away from him. I told him that I needed to get him and mother into the Lazarus pit before it was too late. Putting his hand on my shoulder, he told me that it was already too late for them, considering the Lazarus pit had been destroyed. However, he continued, his time as the demon's head needs to come to a close, and that I am ready to inherit this role. I would have people that need looking after, and it would be my job to protect them. But most importantly, my main mission at this time is to find out who betrayed the League and put an end to them. As grandfather breathed his last breaths, I told him that I will stop at nothing to bring the traitors to justice. His eyes rolled to the back of his head as his hand slid off my shoulder. Tears streamed down my face as anger began to consume me. All I could think of was the unimaginable horrors that awaited the traitor when I got my hands on them. I lifted my grandfather into the air and placed him where the cemetery used to be. Looking around the compound, I noticed that there was a large object in the center courtyard that was lodged into the ground. As I approached it, I saw that it was one of the missiles that the mercenaries were dropping down, but for whatever reason, this one didn't explode. Carefully, I wiped the dirt and ashes that coated the missile to reveal my first clue into finding the traitor. This missile was produced by Wayne Industries. Now my mission had a starting point. I needed to find and kill Wayne. Using the last of the available resources the League had, I was able to narrow down the location of where this Wayne individual was cowering: Gotham City. I have read stories about Gotham, mostly myths surrounding a vigilante that used to roam the streets, but has since disappeared. I choose not to believe in fairy tales. My only reason for being in this cesspit of a city is hunting Bruce Wayne. taking my motorcycle through the vacant highway, I sped through the decrepit, grime-ridden streets of what they dubbed Old Gotham. I decided to cut out the middleman and go for Wayne directly at his home. The streets took me through a back road that switched from city to near jungle in a matter of minutes. The path became so dark that the headlights of my motorcycle could barely cut through its potency. To my surprise, I could hear the faint crashing of a waterfall off in the distance. As I approached where the gate should be, all I saw was rusted metal slung to the ground as the W crest lay on the ground. I drove down the driveway to see the dilapidated manor in the distance. It was in such disarray that the roof was collapsing on itself and the grass surrounding it was dead and dried up. I got off my bike, taking my helmet off and putting it on the seat, and slowly stepped up to the front door. It was hanging open, so I pushed slightly, causing it to swing back a little before falling down. There were no lights on, which didn't surprise me, so I turned on my flashlight and made my way down the decrepit hallway. I ended up searching through every room in the manor, but came up short. I tried to be as quiet as possible, even with the door falling down, but I soon realized that it was more likely Bruce Wayne wasn't there. Could he be dead? It was a possibility, but it seemed unlikely. In fact, something felt off about the whole situation. It didn't feel like he died and the house was just left to rot. It felt more like it was abandoned. But why? Perhaps he was hiding out at his tower, Wayne Industries. Once I arrived, I gazed into the night sky to see the skyscraper that presumably towered over Gotham, now torn to pieces, with graffiti marking the sides of it. A screen above the broken door turned on, playing a recording of a man sitting at a desk, introducing himself as Derek Powers, CEO of Wayne Powers. He tells the viewer that if they're looking for a job here, they won't find it, as this building is the old location. He goes on about the city keeping it for what they called sentimental value, and states to head over across the highway to Neo-Gotham, the true epicenter for industry. Here at Wayne Powers, any career is possible. Live the life you've always wanted. Come and join our family. The recording abruptly stops as the screen shuts off, leaving me standing in the dark. I turn around to see 3 men messing with my motorcycle and call out for them to back off before they get hurt. One pulls out a pocket knife in a pitiful attempt to scare me off, but I encourage him to come closer. One haphazardly lunges at me, but I simply sidestep and put my foot out, tripping him, sending him crashing into the concrete. This caused the second thug to run away in terror, as the third pulls out a handgun and lifts it up to fire at me. His hand is shaking, indicating that he doesn't have the stomach to pull the trigger. But I don't take the chance, as I roll over to the thug on the ground, slamming his face down and picking up the knife, throwing it into the man's hand as he drops the gun. He screamed in pain and ran away, as I casually get back to my bike and head off. Neo-Gotham, even though it's in close proximity to Old Gotham, is a stark contrast. The streets were packed with cars and civilians, and were free from trash or filth. Bright neon signs illuminated the streets, unlike the dark, dingy atmosphere present in Old Gotham. Wayne Powers was the center of Neo-Gotham, with neon arrows leading cars down the highway and to the front of the industrial giant. I knew this building was going to be heavily fortified, with cameras, guards, and security checkpoints. I take a few minutes to observe. The front desk has 3 clerks with guards at either side of the desk. There are also guards at each elevator entrance. Cameras are posted at each corner of the hallway, so I knew I couldn't spend too much time standing around, or I would arouse suspicion. Walking over to the front desk clerk, I see a stack of flyers and ask what they're for. She tells me that they're for determining which floors deal with what industry, such as the 2nd floor dealing with robotics research and the 3rd floor dealing with aerial vaccines. I thank her, but as I try to walk away, she asks me what I'm here for today. I look around to see a sign that says janitorial staff needed, and tell her that's why I'm here. I quickly read the flyer, seeing that, of course, the CEO's office is on the top floor. She tells me to wait in one of the chairs as she leaves, but I turn the other way to see an open door with staff walking in and out of it. The room has a janitor's jumpsuit with a mop and a bucket on the side. I put a hat on and pulled the tip down to cover some of my face as I make my way to the elevator. The guard stops me, asking which floor I'm going to. I tell him that I've been assigned to clean Mr. Powers' office. The guard nods his head, telling me that requires security clearance far above what a janitor has. I shrug, telling him that that's what I've been assigned to. The guard opens the door and leads me in, saying that we'll have a chat with management upstairs. I wait for the door to close and for the elevator to start moving before I use the mop's handle to quickly subdue him. I broke the tip end of the mop handle and stuck it into my pocket. I then pull out some zip ties and put his hands and feet together before opening up the top hatch of the elevator and hoisting myself up there. I begin to pull the guard up there too, whispering that someone will find him, eventually, probably. As the elevator stops, I close the hatch and jump up to the wire as I begin to climb to the top floor. This felt like a cakewalk, as I've had to scale an entire cliffside before with nothing but my bare hands and feet. Once I reach the top, I notice a small box on the side that appears to house the electrical wires connecting to a passcode junction on the other side. This proved to be a routine wire hack as I pulled out the back of the box and began to rewire. I had to make sure that I only rewired this door and not the entire elevator system, or I would attract far too much attention. The light shone green as the door slowly opened. I pried it the rest of the way, hoping to see no one in the hallway. Once I was in the clear, I waited in one of the rooms until one of his assistants left the door open long enough for me to slide in past him. He's standing with his back to the door, looking out into the neon sky of Neo Gotham. As I enter the room, he tells me that he is a bit surprised that I'm here, but nonetheless, this proves to be convenient for him. I ask him a simple question. Where's Bruce Wayne? He turns around, telling me that no one has seen that recluse. He's probably dead for all he cares. It's his company now. He doesn't have to take orders from Bruce anymore. I tell him that he's lying to me, and that it would be in his best interest to confess. He scoffs, telling me that I don't scare him. I answer back, telling him that's fine, I'll just take his head instead. He laughs, calling me a foolish boy, before saying that I have no idea the enemy I'm up against. I was through wasting time, so I pulled out the broken mop handle in my pocket and lunged at him. The glass next to me shatters as a figure pins me to the wall. His armor was similar to the League's, but far more advanced. I reel back in anger, and while looking into his robotic eyes, I tell him that he's the traitor, and to give himself up while I still can breathe. He pulls out a dagger to stab me, but I use the mop handle to wedge between his hand and the knife, dropping it, and using my other hand to grab his throat, slamming us both on the ground. He throws down his arm at me, but I grabbed it and used the momentum of him reeling his arm back to kick him in the face. While down, he kicks his legs into the air, propelling himself back up on 2 feet. I try to get up, but he grabs me again, tasing me with an electric charge in his gauntlet, and throws me up into the ceiling as I collide back with the ground. As my vision blurs from the impact, I hear a strange noise and look up, but all I can make out is an invisible silhouette being highlighted by the neon sign behind him. The door bursts open as a group of security guards file in. They forcefully grab my arms and put them behind me, handcuffing them together and dragging me up. Once they got me to the GCPD, I was thrown onto a chair in a dimly lit room and handcuffed to a bar in the middle of the desk. I contemplated freeing myself as soon as they left the room. It wouldn't have been very difficult, considering the obvious weak points in handcuffs that most people don't know about, but I decided to play along. Maybe I'd learn something about Bruce Wayne. A detective walks in the room, holding a file in one hand and a coffee in the other, as he sets it down. So it looks like we have Mr. Doe, or should I say John Doe. You know, if I had a nickel for every time a John Doe came in here, I'd afford to live somewhere else other than this dump. I will say, you do look familiar. I stare at him blankly as he continues on. Well, you have no records, no credit cards, passports, bank statements, medical history. Hell, you don't even have a social security number. So let me ask you this. What does a ghost want with Derek Powers? I continue to say nothing, looking through the clearly visible 2-sided window. Ah, so the strong silent type. Cool. I've never dealt with one of you guys before. Look, I can tell you're a very serious guy that probably doesn't like his time being wasted. So just cut the crap and come clean so we can stop prolonging this, yeah? Did someone set you up? Let me guess. One of the, workers at the Wonderland Lounge put you up to this? They have been known to do that. Looking at his badge on the table, I ask Detective Grayson where Bruce Wayne is. Oh, so you're the one asking the questions now. Great, I hate doing this part. How about you take my job? I roll my eyes, telling him to answer my question so that I wouldn't have to hurt him. He leaned in closer, saying, "Wow, I feel very threatened right now. I should probably call the police." Oh, wait. Listen, kid, you don't scare me, and my patience is starting to run thin, so I guess I'm just going to have to tell you who you are. You're a ghost with no record, yet you possess high-level martial arts training, as well as having an advanced knowledge of computer systems and hacking countermeasures. He turns a tablet around, showing camera footage from Derek Power's office. And I heard through the grapevine that Nanda Parbat was just attacked, what just so happens to be the sanctuary for the League of Assassins, where you and your friend here seem to be from. I reel back, demanding to know how Grayson could possibly know this information. I'm resourceful, just like you. You're going to tell me why you're after Derek Powers and who your friend is. I lean back, telling him that he's been helpful, but it's time for me to go now. I pull my hands free from the handcuffs and run over to the door, but he flips over the table, putting his foot against the door. You're not the only one with skills, kid. We begin to attack each other, going blow for blow with blocks and counters left and right. He kept pace with me, something no one else has ever been able to do except another member of the League. He starts to gain the upper hand on me, but remembering my resourcefulness, I pull a baton out of his belt and launch it at the fire extinguisher, causing the room to puff with whiteness. I quickly knocked Grayson down before jumping up to one of the vents and making my way out of the GCPD. I may not have learned anything about Bruce Wayne, but I have a lead on where I could get some information. I go into a department store, stealing some fresh clothing as not only a disguise, but as also something clean to wear. As I left the store, a man standing outside was pointing people to a massive directory that showed all the major haunts of Neo-Gotham, one of those being exactly what I needed, the Wonderland Lounge. The 3-story lounge shone with a pink glow as the music pulsated far outside. Some people were stumbling out of the front door, reeking of alcohol, while others were being thrown out by bouncers. As I entered, the strobe lights made the dancers look like they were in slow motion, as women in bunny outfits were serving drinks to the sloppy patrons. I approached one of these women, asking who owned this place. She yells to me over the music that she's never actually seen the owner, but that some of her staff operate on the floor above. I nodded to her and made my way up the stairs. As I got to the door, 2 bouncers were in front of it, which told me to get lost. I told them that wasn't going to happen, and without hesitation, I struck one in the knee and sucker punched the other in the face, before kicking the one on the ground in the face. I pushed them out of my way and opened the door, but it was nothing like what I was expecting. It was an elderly lady and a nurse with her. The nurse looked over to me, asking what the meaning of this intrusion was. I tell her I was told I could get information here. She asked me to look around. Does this look like a directory? I look over to the old woman, asking why she is here above a nightclub instead of in a home. The nurse tells me that this woman owns the club and still insists to see its day-to-day operations. That answer doesn't sit well with me, so I ask her again what's really going on here. The nurse tells me that she's not going to repeat herself and that I need to leave now. I look around the room, telling her that there is an unnatural breeze coming from that 2-way wall to the side, as well as slight scuff marks on the tile near her wheelchair that is found only on moving platforms. So I ask her again, what's it going to take to get some information around here? She hunches for a moment, whispering "damn" under her breath before telling me to come with her. She pushes a 2-way wall to the side as we walk down a flight of stairs. She confesses that this nightclub is a front for their operation, founded by her mother, the original White Rabbit. She's taken over the business, ensuring that things continue to run smoothly, or at least as smooth as they can be in these times. Once we reach her office, she explains that as information brokers, they give out information, but at a price, of course. She then asks me what I'm looking for. I tell her that I need to know where Bruce Wayne is. She answers, saying that this information is highly sought after and will cost him quite a bit. I explain to her that I don't have very much money. She chuckles, telling me that not every price is strictly money. Sometimes it's favors. She commends me for easily taking care of her security at the door and my keen observational skills, so she has a task for me, and in exchange for finishing it, she'll give me information on Bruce Wayne. I nod, asking her what this task is. She goes on, telling me that a mob boss in Gotham, named Two-Face, has something of value to her and that she wants it retrieved. He's holed up in the abandoned Solomon Wayne courthouse in Old Gotham. I asked her why she didn't just have the police come in and arrest Two-Face and get her item back that way. She answers back that Old Gotham has basically been turned into a no man's land since Neo Gotham houses the industries and civilians. The GCPD turn a blind eye to Old Gotham for the most part, unless something outrageous happens there. She looks into my eyes, saying that nothing outrageous better happen, or she'll withhold the information from me. I snap back, telling her that this isn't the first time I've done this, so back off. She leans back, saying that she can send me some backup if I require it. I tell her that I'm a one-man army. I can get her stolen item back with ease. She rolls her eyes, telling me that this job isn't just as simple as it sounds. I tell her that I can take care of myself and to be ready with my information upon my arrival. I pull a remote out of my pocket and click a button. After a few moments, my motorcycle comes flying around the corner and stops in front of me. I get on and head back into the pit of Old Gotham. Even the smells in the air differ greatly from Neo to Old Gotham. Where Neo smells pristine and clean, Old Gotham smells rancid, almost like a bomb went off here and no one put the pieces back together. I was pretty surprised that they didn't gut this place earlier, but that would bring the unnecessary trash into Neo Gotham. When I arrived at the courthouse, it was split in two, one side being relatively untouched and the other side completely burned and in disrepair. I could tell why they called him Two-Face now. He was clearly obsessed. I walked through the doors and into the courtroom, which even that was split in two. A screen then came down as this Two-Face appeared on it, saying that I must be one of the poor fools looking for him. He then yells that I can't have it, it's all theirs. His voice goes soft again, asking if I really thought it was going to be that easy. He yells again, saying that there are two safe houses, it's in the name. Just then, a horde of 30 gang members leapt over the sides and began to dogpile me. I threw them off me and began to simultaneously attack all of them, flipping over one of them to kick the other in the face. I grabbed a bat that fell on the ground and used that as crowd control, knocking back several thugs at once. Some began pulling out knives that I easily countered and used to stab other thugs in the legs before knocking them out. I was beginning to feel fatigued, but I had to keep my strength up or I would be consumed by this mob. I had to act fast and finish this fight, so I used their weapons against them until I took down every last one. I made my way over to the screen and began to tap into the signal, showing me that Two-Face was broadcasting from the old Wayne Industries tower. As I made my way back to Wayne Industries, I noticed that there were a couple of trucks tailing me. I decided to speed up to see if they would do the same, and when they did, I made a hard right down a narrow alleyway, throwing them off my trail. But as I was heading out of the alley, another truck pulled out in front of me. I jumped off my bike as it was sent careening into the side of the truck. As it was spinning out of control, I crawled onto the roof until I got to the passenger's side, and after breaking the window, I threw him out of the truck. I then rolled to the other side and did the same to the driver. Once they were both taken care of, my motorcycle that was self-driving on the side of the truck pulled in closer, and I hopped onto it as the truck went flying into a brick wall. As I was pulling away from the wreckage, the other two trucks flew in behind me. I used my oil slick to send one of the trucks crashing into the other before both of them crashed into a light post, causing the beam to collapse on them. Looking back up at Wayne Industries, everything looked as it did before. However, as I step into the front door, I hear the tick of C4 as the room in front of me begins to blow up. I get out in the nick of time, now angry that I've alerted everyone of my presence. I then began to scale sections of the tower. Each floor has a group of armed guards that are aware of my presence and are hunting for me. But being Ra's al Ghul's heir has taught me a thing or two about stealth and espionage. These thugs clearly lack any sort of military training, so it makes taking them down all that much simpler. Two-Face certainly has connections though, as his thugs are using top-of-the-line firearms, strangely similar to the ones used by the mercenaries who attacked the League. Taking them down one by one with aggression, I began to throw bricks at the walls and knock down support beams, all with the aim to cause paranoia and fear among them. People think irrationally when they're afraid, allowing for easier takedowns as they're more spread out. Once I get to the top floor, I see someone on a chair with snipers on them and other armed guards. As I move to quickly take down the snipers, I look to see who's on the chair. It's just a kid, some girl. Why are there so much heavy defenses and secrecy? What's so important about a kid? Whatever the reasoning, I needed to get to Bruce Wayne, so taking down Two-Face and rescuing her was my top priority. As the lasers from the sniper started to disappear, as well as his armed forces, Two-Face shouted for me to show myself, or he would blow the girl's brains out. I call out from the shadows, asking why he would go through all this work of protecting her just to kill her to threaten me. He yells back that he doesn't understand why everyone wants her, but the fact that he has her makes her valuable to him. I pick up a sidearm from one of the downed thugs, using it to shoot the pistol out of Two-Face's hand. I run over to the girl who he's thrown on the ground, lifting her up and asking if she's okay. Before she can say anything, I feel a gun pointed to my head, with Two-Face standing over me, saying, "It's in the name, kid. There's always two." As he is motioning for me to hand her over, he's hit on the head as blood sprays from behind him. A woman in a black mask and dress stood in front of me with a bloody hammer and a syringe as multiple black masked thugs file in behind her, grabbing the girl. The woman then sticks the syringe in my neck, telling her men to take me too. One thug walks over to me and hits me in the head with a bat, knocking me out. When I come to, I'm hanging by chains in a warehouse. The woman in the mask says that I'm finally awake. It took some time. I move my hands around, seeing if there are any obvious weaknesses in the chains, but they're too sturdy to move. She stands up, asking who sent me to get the girl. I tell her that I didn't know a girl was involved, just that I needed to retrieve something. She motions to one of her thugs, telling me that if I'm not going to answer her questions, it's not going to go so well for me. The thug goes behind me with a spiked whip and begins to attack. I wince in pain, but I've trained for this. In order to get through torture, one must meditate, focus on inner peace, and remember one's goals. If a person loses sight of any one of these aspects, then they will succumb to the pain. I think about my childhood, the innocence that I had before my training began. I remember the lush gardens in the springtime and the snow-capped mountains in the winter. She yells for the thug to stop, asking me what I know. I repeat myself, telling her that I don't know who this girl is and why everyone wants her. She says I'm lying as the whips go deeper into my back. I hold my composure, not letting her get to my head. She then takes another syringe, telling me that I'll give her any information she wants to know with this. As she is walking over to administer this drug into my neck, the warehouse starts to violently shake. She grabs my neck, asking me how I'm doing this. I spit back, telling her that this isn't me. The warehouse shakes even more aggressively, and she orders the thug with the whip to go and check it out, but when he steps out of the room, a giant branch grabs him and slams him into the wall. More thugs begin to pile through the hallway, but are simultaneously thrown to the sides and knocked down. Suddenly, the plants begin to wrap around the doorway as the woman attempts to flee, but is grabbed by the plant. Just then, the girl from before walks in, her eyes pure green as she looks possessed. She lifts the woman in the air and towards her, as her voice is all distorted, and tells the woman to leave her alone before she ends her miserable life. The woman tries to use the hammer to pry herself out of her bonds, but is only gripped tighter by the branches. I watch as this woman is being squeezed to death, but the girl shouts to stop as the green glow from her eyes disappear, and the plant drops the woman before shriveling to the ground. The girl slumps to the ground, drained of energy, as she looks up to me. She asks why I helped her, which I reply that it was a favor for something, and asked if she could get me down from there. She nods her head and went to the controls, lowering me down to the ground as I got the chains from off my hands and feet. I felt incredible pain to bend over, as my back had just been flayed and it was covered in blood. I asked her how she could do that, and to my surprise, she told me that she had no idea how she did that in the first place. All she remembers is that she was being interrogated by one of these masked men, who was asking her why she is so valuable to everyone. After she told him that she didn't know, he began to hit her, trying to provoke a response. And he really did, because after that, all she could remember was intense rage. I asked her where her parents were, but she replied that she doesn't have parents, or at least if she does, she can't remember them. I nod, telling her that we need to get out of here before more people show up. I walked over to one of the thugs, grabbing some of his equipment before heading out of the warehouse. As we're on our way to the Wonderland Lounge on my bike, I ask the girl what her name is. She tells me that she's not really sure, so I respond, asking how Terra sounds. She asks me how I came up with that name, and I tell her that Terra is the Latin word for earth, something she seems to be able to control. After a moment of thinking on it, she replies that she likes that name, and asks what mine is. I tell her that my name is Damien and that I'm going to bring her back to her friends below the Wonderland Lounge. She grips my shoulders tight, telling me that I can't take her back there. I ask her why, and she replies that they will just sell her off to the highest bidder. That's what happened last time. I explain to her that that can't be right, as they were the ones who sent me to get her. Tara explains that her transportation was hijacked by that two-faced man that was holding her hostage. They were trying to bring her to someone else. I asked her who, but she says she didn't know. They stayed anonymous. I tell her that I need information from them, so I have to take her back there. She pleads for me not to go, but this is more important than her, so I take her back there. Once I bring her into the White Rabbit's headquarters, she thanks me for bringing back her stolen goods, but that I didn't do as subtle of a job as I said I would. She showed me a TV showcasing news broadcasts at the courthouse and at the old Wayne Industries building. I explained to her that there were some complications, but I fulfilled my end of the bargain, so now it was her time to fulfill hers. She told me to hand over the girl first, which I declined, telling her that the information comes first or there's no deal. She throws her hand in the air, sighing and saying, "Fine," before sitting back down on her chair. She begins to explain to me that Bruce Wayne disappeared 3 years ago after claiming that he was going to be away on a business trip. But he never came back, and strangely enough, the Batman, Gotham's protector for over 2 decades, disappeared soon after. It didn't take long for her informants to piece together that Batman was in fact Bruce Wayne, and that something terribly wrong must have happened in order for Batman to disappear the way he did. Her scouts have searched Wayne Manor over and over for years and have found nothing, but maybe there's something they missed. I tell her that this isn't enough, but she snaps back, telling me to take what I will with that information, but that's all she has. She then demands that I hand over the girl, but I tell her, sorry, the deal's off, as I throw down tear gas that I stole from the thug in the warehouse. All of her informants begin opening fire as I grab Tara's arm, and we both make our way out of the lounge. They block off the underground exit, so we have to run through the club as the music is blaring and the informants are chasing us. One of them shoots their pistol in the air to get the crowds out of the way, but this only causes hysteria, turning the club into chaos. This bought me and Tara plenty of time to make our exit, albeit I had to bash a few skulls in the process. I told Tara to get on the back seat as we boarded the bike and made our way to Wayne Manor. It's at this time that I begin to tell Tara that we're going to be on the run for a while, but that we should be safe at Wayne Manor for a little bit. Tara asks me why I've been looking for Bruce Wayne, and I reply that I have unfinished business with him and want to ask him a few questions. She then asks if no one has seen Bruce Wayne in 3 years, and people have searched Wayne Manor for years now. Why would we go back there? I replied that even I had searched Wayne Manor previously, but I knew something wasn't right when I went. I figured that I was missing something, but now I know that I didn't look everywhere. She asks me what I meant by that, and I tell her that I believe Bruce Wayne is still alive, and that he's been hiding right under everyone's noses for 3 years now. As I get back to Wayne Manor, I'm reminded of its decrepit nature. I tell Tara to stay close to me, as I'm sure we haven't seen the last of White Rabbit and her informants. As I search down the hallways, I go into the library, figuring that the clue of where Bruce Wayne is surely lies within all this information. As I'm looking around, I can hear the sounds of cars pulling into the driveway. I tell Tara to stay close to me and quiet. We'll be okay. I hear informants getting out of their vehicles, and knew time was of the essence. As I looked around, I noticed something peculiar about the grand piano off to the side of the room. It was covered in dust and grime, which isn't all that surprising, but what caught me off guard was the fact that multiple keys were free of dust. I began to play these keys, which brought attention to us, and Tara whispered for me to stop or we'd get caught. I knew this was important, so I continued to play, and my suspicions were correct, as the shelf in front of me slid to the side, revealing an entrance blocked by a retinal scanner. I had no time to hack into it, so I just put my eyes to it. Somehow, the scanner accepted my eyes, and I took Tara and hustled through the entrance, which closed behind us as we went down the steps. Tara heard the rush of people behind us and let out a sigh of relief. As we walked down the stairs, it was becoming clear that we were walking into a cave, as it was cold and the air felt damp. Little eyes looked down on us from the ceiling as I told Tara not to look up and to keep walking. It was almost pitch black in there, and I felt metal under my feet, like we were in some kind of underground fortress. Tara asked me how I was able to get through that scanner, and before I could reply, a computer screen flashed on, with a robotic voice telling me that it's been waiting for me. I look up to see a face on a screen, and demand to tell me where Bruce Wayne is. The screen tells me that I'm looking at him. In bewilderment, I tell it to stop lying and give up Bruce Wayne. Bruce says that he's been watching me ever since I came to the manor. He says that I've made a real mess of things out in Gotham just looking for him. He knows why I'm here, but he'd rather hear it from me. My anger starts to flare up as I demand to know why he ordered the attack on the League of Assassins. Bruce robotically sighs, telling me that the League had been his adversary ever since he abandoned them well over 30 years ago. However, he never operated like that, using firearms and military backing to wipe out colonies of people. He protected Gotham. That was it. He didn't leave the city unless he had to, which he didn't allow very often. And as I could see, he still never left Gotham. He had nothing to gain from wiping out the League, but someone else did. Someone I've already confronted. Derek Powers, the CEO, the man who forced him out of his own company, ordered that attack on Nanda Parbat. He's shifted Wayne Industries from being a company centered around saving lives to a private military. Having a secret facility in Nanda Parbat would be ideal for the criminal activities he's trying to keep off the books. But there's something missing. He has a benefactor, but they use a number of phony aliases that Bruce tracks to no end, leaving the trail cold over and over again. He tells me to figure out who Powers is working with, put an end to his plans, and leave Gotham, not to return again. My anger simmering down, I actually thank Bruce for telling me what really happened, before making my way out of the cave. A voice then calls out, asking Bruce if he's really not going to tell him. I turn around to see Detective Grayson standing by Bruce, as he tells him to pull up the test. I walk back over, asking Grayson how he got here, and what he means by this test. Grayson answers back, saying that he's been here once or twice before, and asks me why I think the retinal scanner let me into the cave. I replied, saying that this place has clearly gone to hell, so it's probably faulty wiring. Grayson shakes his head, telling me that he meant something when he said that I looked familiar to him. He goes on to say that while he was laying the beatdown on me, he got a sample of my blood and brought it back here. I snapped back, saying that was a close fight and he knows it. He answers back, telling me that when they ran the DNA test on me, it was a match. A match for what? I asked. Bruce's eyes locked onto mine as he tells me that he's my father. I laugh it off, telling him that's impossible. I've never seen him before, and neither my mother nor my grandfather have ever mentioned him. Bruce replies, telling me that Ra's al Ghul was his mentor long ago, and Talia was his lover, as at one point they were betrothed to one another. He was set up to be the next demon's head. Anger started to rekindle in me as I demand to know why he abandoned me and my family. Bruce snapped back, telling me that he never married my mother and he never fully joined the League, as they were too radical, and he swore that he would never take a life, even if it was under the guise of doing it for the greater good. At least, that's what he believed in a past life. Processing all of this information, I asked Bruce how he was my father then. He explained that Ra's forced Talia to have an heir, specifically one with Bruce, so they orchestrated a plan to drug him. He goes on to say that his memory was wiped from this incident for a long time until he was able to obtain these memories back, but he had no idea that he actually had a son with Talia. Feeling betrayed by this revelation, I told Bruce that even if he really is my father, after I'm done in Gotham, I never need to see him again. Trying to break the long silence between all of us, Grayson tells me he has a lead on my ninja friend. He explains that when him and a few other detectives were called in to inspect the crime scene at Wayne Powers, he put a bug under the desk. This proved to be helpful, as Powers has had many conversations with someone he's called an assassin. He tells me that I might not like this part, as he overheard the assassin saying that he's been following me around Gotham, making sure I'm staying in line. He tells me not to worry, as he has made sure that Wayne Manor was secure from both him and White Rabbit's informants, telling me that I should be thanking him, by the way. Ignoring that last part, I ask Grayson what he means by the ninja saying that I'm staying in line. He replies, saying that he's not sure, but that he has some valuable information for me. He explains that he overheard another conversation, with the ninja saying that he'll watch over the shipment at the Gotham docks to ensure their safety. Whatever they're shipping out, it can't be good. Bruce answers back, saying that it sounds like a trap. Ninjas, especially those trained by the League, are rigorously taught to scan their environments constantly for new traps or dangers. For this ninja, who Bruce is assuming has plenty of experience, seeing as how he handled me pretty well, has been taught to do so. I snap back, telling everyone to back off me. He got lucky with his tased gauntlets. I would have won that fight if not for those. Grayson tells me to calm down and stops thinking that I have all the answers. Accept help when it's provided, because it won't always be. I tell them both that we're heading out, but Bruce stops us again, finally asking who she is. I tell them that this is Tara, the girl everyone's been after. We know why she's being hunted, as she has crazy levels of power. We'll be able to take down the traitor with ease, as well as powers. Bruce tells me to think, saying that if everyone's after her, it's a terrible idea to bring her out into the field. Does she at least know how to control her abilities? She replies, saying that at the moment, no, but she is working on it. Bruce tells her to sit this one out while I do reconnaissance, and only reconnaissance. I should figure out what is being shipped first, and then once I have all the information needed, as well as adequate backup, then I fight them. I tell Bruce that there's no more time to wait, and we know where they are, and I have an ace up my sleeve with Tara. He'll never be able to take on both Tara and me. Bruce tells Tara to stay in the cave. She'll be the safest this way. Tara snaps back, saying that she can take care of herself and doesn't need to be told what to do. Grayson walks over to me, saying that if we're going out there, we should have some gear. I walk over to one of the glass cases, saying that if this is what he wants me to wear, that ain't going to happen. He rolls his eyes, saying that that's not what he had in mind anyway, and hands me light chest armor, gauntlets, knee guards, and a few shurikens, all relics from Bruce's early days of crime fighting. Once I strapped the gear on, I asked Tara if she was ready to go, which she nodded yes, as we went out of the cave. Once we arrived at the docks, using binoculars, I located the freight ship which housed multiple Wayne Powers mercs. They seemed to be unloading crates off into trucks. I continued to watch as they loaded these trucks, looking for the traitor. Perhaps he had lied about his whereabouts, or maybe this really was a trap. But whatever it was, this was going to be stopped by us. Just then, I saw him, crouching above the mercs, overseeing the operation, but from a distance. I looked around the shipping yard for any possible surprises, but when I looked back where the ninja had been, he was gone. I put down the binoculars, asking Tara if she saw where the ninja went. She confesses that she never saw him in the first place. I picked up the binoculars again, overseeing the operation, but when I called out for her, I heard no reply. I quickly turned around to see the ninja holding Tara, putting his hand over her mouth. The ninja spoke, saying that Ray should become a fool in his old age, to hand over the League to an inexperienced child. I replied, saying that I am Ra's al Ghul's heir, the only one fit to lead the League since his passing, a death that he caused. The ninja snapped back, saying that the League was his birthright, not mine, as he had served Ra's long before I came into the picture. Tired of being held against her will, Tara's eyes became green again as plants burst out of the ground, grappling the ninja. The mercenaries down below hear the conflict and begin quickly loading the cargo while also getting on the defensive. I told Tara to hold him as long as she could while I got down there and stopped their operation. With a nod, I jumped below, using the darkness of the night to mask my coming. I began pulling them into the shadows in front of their allies, allowing their fears to arise. As I took down a group of mercs surrounding one of the crates, I broke it open and looked inside. I was expecting something like guns or military hardware, but what I found was much different. It was hundreds of vials of blood. What was really going on here? I went back to check with Tara, but when I returned, she was on the ground, as the ninja stood above her. I pulled out a couple shurikens and threw them at him, which he ducked under and flipped in the air, landing in front of me. Our rematch started as I began attempting to kick his feet out from under him and slam him to the ground. He jumped above my sweep, using his elbow to slam into my face. I reeled back, allowing him to come to me as I countered his punches and kicks. I saw the electrical current start back up in his hands, and as he tried to grab me again, I ducked under them, pulling his arms to the ground where a small puddle of rain had formed. This shock went through his armor, causing him to scream out before landing back on the ground. I jumped onto his chest, pulling the sword out of his sheath, and began to slash him with it. I decided to swing with more ferocity and less predictability, as he would know how to counter league-based fighting styles. This proved to be effective, as my slashing was beginning to tear into his armor. He began pulling out his dagger, using it to counter my heavy blade slashes. My adrenaline was at an all-time high, so much so that I could barely feel the multiple small cuts that he was attacking me with. I began to use all my force to swing down at him, causing him to lose his dagger, while also having his helmet slashed down the middle. He fell to the ground as I put my blade to his throat. I kneeled down, ripping the helmet off of his face. He wasn't lying when he said that he had been a loyal servant of my grandfather's, as I was looking into the eyes of Malcolm Merlin. I yelled at him, asking how he could betray the League, his own family, that took him in when he had nothing. He yelled back, saying that the League was his to command, not mine, and it was a disgrace to his honor. Raish spat on his legacy by allowing a child like me to be handed the League, without even earning it. I put the blade closer to his throat, saying that I just earned it now by taking down the traitor. He laughed, telling me that I'm not even close to taking him down, and that he's really already won. I delivered the last part of the puzzle straight to them. I kicked Merlin hard in the chest before looking over to Tara, who had finally gotten to her feet and was making her way towards me. As I looked down at Merlin, my head started to throb and my body began to feel weak. My grip tightened around the blade as my hands started to shake. I lifted the blade above Merlin, turning it towards me. I could hear Tara in the background, but her voice was muffled. I took the blade pointed at me and plunged it into my chest. I dropped to my knees, seeing the blade sticking out of my back as my head began to clear. I pulled the blade out of my stomach, but it was too late, as blood was gushing out of my chest and my head became light. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Tara run over to me, begging to know what I was doing. I slumped to the ground, laying down as the world around me began to enclose. My vision was dimming, but the last thing I saw was Tara's eyes become yellow as she placed her hands over my stomach. However, she was grabbed by what looked like a giant gorilla, which actually talked, telling Merlin that he was sloppy and almost failed him. Merlin told it that he needed a little more time, and then he would have had us. Unacceptable, it yells before slamming its fist down. It then grabbed Tara, whose eyes went back to her regular color before she fainted in its arm. When I came to, I saw that I was back in the cave underneath Wayne Manor, laying on a table. Grayson walked over to me, asking me what happened out there. I told him that me and Tara stopped Merlin and saw that the crates at the shipping dock were full of vials of blood. But then something happened. I stabbed myself with my blade, and a giant talking gorilla took Tara. I confessed to Grayson that I can't even explain what happened, but Bruce chimes in, telling me that I encountered Gorilla Grodd. I turned around, asking him who that is, which he answered that he hasn't encountered him in years. Frankly, he thought Grodd had died years ago after his last encounter with the Flash. He finally explains that Grodd is a mastermind and genius tactician who has the ability to control people's minds. That's why I stabbed myself. But what doesn't make sense is how I was able to fully heal from my fatal wound. I explained to them that Tara's eyes became yellow and she put her hands on my chest. Bruce explains that she has more abilities than even she knows, and now it's starting to make sense why Grodd wants her. I tell Bruce to fill me in on that, which he replies that Tara is the key to executing his plan, but he doesn't know how. At least now they can link in all of them together. Powers, Merlin, and Grodd are all in league. Whatever they're planning, it has to do with Nanda Parbat. He finishes by telling me that even though they've gained vital information, he was reckless and almost got himself killed, along with allowing Tara to be taken. I snapped back, answering that we were able to take down Merlin. We just couldn't account for Grodd being there. We had no idea. Bruce answers back that that's why he told me to do reconnaissance first before I went in. Not listening to reason is going to get him killed and push everyone away. He should know. He then tells me to listen to him and learn from the mistakes that he made, because he wasn't always stuck inside this computer. I asked him how he came to be like this, and after a moment of hesitation, he answered, telling me that this all happened because of his mistakes. The Batcave is pitch black, with narrow beams of moonlight protruding through cracks in the foundation, being one of the only light sources. The lights from the back computer glow over the centerpiece of the cave, the Batmobile parked in the middle, with the trophy room on the side. Bruce is alone. Barb left the crime fighter life behind, Dick is in Bloodhaven, and Alfred is gone. Still wearing his bat suit, he leans over to a cadaver table, analyzing a woman's body that has succumbed to Joker's laughing gas. He grabs a swab from the side table, sliding it over her mouth to collect enough of a sample before dropping it into a glass tube and guiding it into the back computer. As it's analyzing this new strain and synthesizing a cure for it, Bruce slumps in his chair. How many more people am I going to let hurt? Bruce swivels his chair around, putting his hand on his chin that has now grown a full beard. Since Alfred died at the hands of the Joker, Bruce has stopped taking care of himself, letting his body, suit, the manor, and the cave fall apart. Instead of seeking the proper treatment for himself, he built makeshift braces over his arms and legs, allowing him still to fight, albeit with great pain to himself. He rolls over to the back computer, switching the monitor to a camera feed of Arkham Asylum. He sees Joker in his cell, smiling into the camera with missing teeth and blood staining his white, splotchy face. Bruce had already beaten Joker, yet the victory felt hollow. A year ago, as Bruce held Alfred in his arms, he told Bruce to never stoop to Joker's level. He needs to be better, not just for himself, but for Gotham. A tear rolls down Bruce's eye in the present as he thinks of the nightmare that has been plaguing him ever since. Holding a picture of him and Alfred, Bruce says, "I'm sorry, Alfred, but I can't let him hurt anyone else. I can't take the pain any longer. This is for you and Barb and Jason and Gotham." Letting the cure run its course, Bruce grunts as he gets up and limps over to his cowl that has been crudely stitched up from years of crime fighting and pulls it over his head. He walks slowly to the Batmobile as the headlights flash on and the ignition roars. Once he steps into the Batmobile, the AI asks him where his destination is. Arkham Asylum. The platform shifts, turning the Batmobile around as it faces the waterfall exit. Flames torch out of the afterburner behind the Batmobile as it flies out of the cave and onto the back road leading to Arkham. As the Batmobile takes him to the front gate of Arkham, Batman looks out to see the twisted madhouse illuminated in the night by flashes of lightning. He knows that Joker's cell is at the top of the tower, being the hardest spot to break out of. The Batmobile goes into standby mode as all the lights turn out, but the vehicle is still on. He hops out, sneaking his way past the watchtowers and guards as he makes his way to the east side wall. He pulls out his grapnel gun, using it to bring him to the top of the tower. Batman looks through the bars to see the Joker laying on the ground with his back towards him. Joker asks if Batsy has come to say hi. More like goodbye, Batman tells him. Batman is somehow in the cell with Joker, and to Joker's surprise, but also with twisted delight. He tells Batman that he always keeps him on his toes. Batman then asks him why he's let him live for so long. Joker says that he's been asking that same question for years now. I mean, what's it gonna take? He paralyzed one partner and killed the other. Hell, he even whacked his old butler. Batman rushes to Joker, grabbing his collar and picking him up into the air. "What did you say?" Joker replies, telling him, "Oh, come on. After all this time fighting each other, you really thought I didn't know who you were? But I didn't care about you being Bruce Wayne. I only cared about us, the fun we have. When I poisoned Gotham's water supply last year, I made sure there was a direct line to Wayne Manor, just for your butler." He had to admit, Bats, he's jealous. He wanted him all to himself, no one else. It worked splendidly. No more side losers running with Batman. He throws Joker, his head slamming into the ground, causing it to spew blood. Batman replies, telling him that for once, his plan actually worked. "This is the end, Joker. The end of us. This struggle. This war. It's over." Joker smiles with a big grin, saying that he's been waiting to hear Batman say that since the moment they started this dance. He tells Bats that he's going to miss him, but he's going to be great. Batman asks what he means by that. Picking up Joker again, he screams for him to tell him what he means. Joker tells him that he better hurry, the guards are on their way. And if they find out that he's here to kill him, they'll hunt him down. "This is your only chance, Batsy. I'd take it." Batman turns his head, hearing the footsteps of the guards as they stumble their way up the spiral stairs. Joker begins laughing hysterically as Batman's heart begins to pound. Everything he's fought against, was for naught. He had succumbed to the darkness. Batman grabs Joker, beginning to twist his neck. Joker yells to see him in hell. Batman, with the last of his strength, breaks the Joker's neck as his body drops to the ground, lifeless. All the pain he had caused would no longer happen. His anarchy was over, but so was the Batman. He knew that he couldn't continue down this path any longer. Batman leans into the Joker's corpse as an opening in his neck shows. He looks closer, and then a puff of Joker's toxin sprays Batman in the face as his vision begins to blur. The guards were only moments away, and Batman lunged out of the window, through the bars, as the guards burst in, seeing only Joker's corpse on the ground. As he gets back into the Batmobile, Batman turns on his communicator, leaving a message. He tells Lucius that even though they haven't spoken in some time, this is urgent, and he needs him at the cave. His life depends on it. The Batmobile is on autopilot as it hurtles towards the Batcave with full speed. It flies through the waterfall and lands onto the center platform. Batman stumbles out, chuckling in pain as he attempts to resist the laughing gas. He rips off his cowl and looks into the mirror as his face is already starting to slowly become whiter. The elevator drops down as Lucius, Barbara, and Dick all come out of it and rush over to Bruce. Barbara asks what happened to him. Bruce tells her that it was the Joker. He poisoned him. Dick asks where he is now and that he'll go after him. Bruce replies, telling him that no, he won't, because he's dead. Lucius then asks what Bruce did. Bruce tells them all that he had no other choice. He couldn't live with himself any longer, knowing that Joker was still breathing. Not after what he did to this family. Not after what he did to Alfred. Barbara replies, telling Bruce that's against everything they've fought for. How could he do this? Bruce replied, telling her that he couldn't take it anymore. Batman is a symbol of vengeance and fear for criminals. Gotham still needs him, but it can't be him anymore. Not just because of his situation now, but because Bruce has lost faith in himself, and that he's not fit to be Batman anymore. Dick replies, telling Bruce that he stood for something. We all did, and he just spat on his life's work. Bruce answers that he's sorry that he let them all down. He lost his way. His crusade is over. Barbara has chosen a new path in life, one that he's proud of, but Gotham needs Batman. Without his symbol, Gotham will be lost forever. Dick, please take over for me. I can't any longer. Barbara tells Bruce that she can't forgive him for this, but she won't forget what he's done for her, what he's done for all of them, and tells him goodbye. Dick replies that he doesn't forgive Bruce either, but this is bigger than both of them, and it's what he's trained for, as much as he doesn't want it. Barb puts her hand on Bruce's shoulder as she rolls back to the elevator, looking at Bruce and the cave one last time before getting in and leaving for good. Looking over to Lucius, Bruce tells him that he extracted some of his blood and put it in the synthesizer, and he'll see what it says. The Bat computer lights up, showing that the blood sample of the deceased woman has no cure. It's irreversible. Bruce asks Lucius how much time he has. Lucius replies, telling him that at this rate, 2 hours. After that, you'll become like that woman over there, or worse. Bruce asks if there's anything that can be done to prevent this, even if it's just for another day. Lucius replies that he's afraid there's nothing that can be done for his body. But his brain, however, there is something that he might be able to do about that. How? Lucius replies that one of the last projects he did for Wayne Industries was for its medical division. It was designed to act as a carrier for heart transplants, a tube that would allow the heart to still be active, have it simulate being in a person's body so that the heart would stay strong and healthy for longer before the surgery. We were never able to test it out because the project got shut down, but the prototype is still there. He might be able to get in, but it could take him an hour before he gets back here. Bruce tells him to do it. He'll be fine. Just get there as soon as possible. Dick tells Lucius that he'll watch over Bruce, make sure nothing happens, but hurry, please. An hour later, Lucius returns to the cave, but Bruce is not in his chair anymore. He looks around to see where he is but can't find him. He hears rattling over to the side and sees Dick grappling with him, restraining him to the sides of the cadaver table. "He doesn't have much time, Lucius. He needs to do this now." Lucius tells him that he brought the necessary equipment, but his hands aren't as steady as they used to be. This could get messy. He's going to put Bruce out, but he'll be awake before he knows it. Through painful laughs and giggles, Bruce thanks Lucius, telling him that he can't be the hero Gotham needs without him, and he's sorry that he let him all down. Dick tells Bruce to sleep, and that they'll see him again soon. Bruce's heart pounds as the syringe goes into his neck. He hasn't felt dread like this since his parents were lying dead in front of his eyes. In all his nightmares about his possible death as Batman, him lying on a table, dying from turning into the Joker, was the last thing he ever thought could happen. But here he was, his life coming to an end. The last thought in his head is about his parents, wondering if they would be proud of the man he was. Suddenly, his world went black. Where am I? What's going on? Lucius swivels the chair around and Dick walks over from the medical table as they both look at the back computer. Lucius tells Bruce that it worked, he was able to save his mind. But where's my body? Out in the cemetery, Dick replies. He'll get his tombstone soon, but he had to stay here and make sure this crazy procedure worked. He asks Bruce how he feels. Bruce tells him that he has no more feelings, only thoughts and memories, and that he's surrounded by data. Lucius tells him that it's going to take getting used to, considering that now he's one with the back computer. It's like being Oracle, but with easier access to information. He is the information now. Dick tells him that yeah, this is really strange, but it's all we've got right now. Bruce tells Dick that there's work to be done. He's just received a tip about King Shark, he'd better hurry. Dick replies, telling him that it doesn't matter if his body's dead. Things will never change. I looked at Grayson, asking him why he stopped being Batman. Before Grayson could answer, Bruce chimed in, saying that he pushed him away. He was angry at himself for failing as Batman, and took out that anger on him. He made too many mistakes. He was unfit to be Batman any longer. He tells me that I may not want to hear this, but Gotham needs Batman. I'm reckless, headstrong, and selfish, all qualities that don't mesh well with being Batman. But we're out of options, and I'm one of the only few who can stand against Grodd. I tell Bruce that Gotham is just a means to an end. I have no interest in staying here. Bruce answers back that he knows the last of the community from the League are hiding outside of the city. They're going to need a permanent home, and he doesn't see any other options for them. The League is gone, and that means the radical mission of Ra's is over. He tells me that it's time for me to make my own legacy. After thinking for some time, weighing out my options and looking at the facts, I decide that I'll take the mantle of the Batman, but I'm going to make it my own. I'm my own person. I won't be told how to be Batman. Bruce answers that he doesn't like this at all, but accepts that this is the reality they're in. I take the suit out of the case, admiring its state-of-the-art features and tech, but realizing that it needs some modifications. I would then spend the next few nights making modifications to the suit, as well as to Merlin's sword. After the suit was finished, I went to Bruce, telling him that I was ready to finish this fight. Bruce looks at the suit, asking what the hell did I do to it. I tell him that I've made improvements, with Grayson telling me that it suits me better this way, but that I'll need the last piece of equipment. He hands me a metal band that I place under my hood, as he tells me that it will combat the effects of Grodd's mind control, but only as long as I keep it on my head. Bruce tells me that with that suit on, he'll be able to hear and see what's happening, and will be able to aid me. I tell Bruce and Grayson that acting recklessly got me into this situation, but that it wouldn't happen again. I wouldn't let Tara down again. Grayson accepts the sentiment, telling me that when he retrieved my body from the shipping dock, he took a sample of Merlin's blood and had Bruce analyze and track it. Bruce replies, answering that he's tracked Merlin's sample to somewhere in the Wayne Powers Research District, but the connection becomes lost from that point on. I tell them that it's a start and get onto my bike, heading out to Wayne Powers. The research division of Wayne Powers is a separate compound outside of the central corporate building that I was in last time. Bruce comes on the line, telling me that he's hacked into their security feed, disabling the alarms and allowing me easier access to infiltrate the facility. As I get to the roof, Bruce tells me to use 2 fingers, putting them against the ground. When I do, I hear the voices of mercenaries down below saying that they were finally able to transport the girl to the DNA forensic lab. The other merc asks if he knows why they took the girl back there in the first place. He answers back, saying that it's gotta have something to do with that blood they had shipped in. I ask Bruce if he heard this, which he tells me that he did, and has located the lab they were referencing. Using my suit's advanced stealth capabilities, I cloaked myself with invisibility, skulking through the facility and taking down mercenaries that got in my way. Once I reached the forensics lab, I saw Grodd standing over Tara, telling her that she was brought here for one reason alone. Powers walks over to Grodd, asking him if she'll even know how to do what Grodd wants. Grodd grabs him by the collar, telling him that she'll learn how to do it, or she'll be eliminated. That's all there is to it. Tara turned around, shouting that she'll never listen to him, and that she's getting out of here. Her eyes turn green, but are turned back to normal color almost instantly, as Grodd tells her that he is in control, and won't be doing anything he doesn't want her to. Powers, shaking off what happened to him earlier, asks Grodd what will happen if the kid is still out there. Grodd replies that I'm inconsequential to him. If anything, Merlin will have a chance to redeem himself after that embarrassing display from before. He further explains that I don't have anywhere else to go. Nanda Parbat was wiped of League control and will now act as a home for higher beings. I ask Bruce what Grodd means by that, with Bruce saying that he's not sure, but to stay put for a little bit, find out what Grodd is planning before stopping him. Grodd stomps over to Tara, telling her that she has abilities far above what she knows. He remarks that it is curious about her origins, as she herself doesn't even know, but they are going to find out. He states that through the limited observations that he was able to make concerning her abilities and how they work, it seems to be attached to emotions. He then drags a crate over to her, saying that these vials contain his enhanced genetic DNA, and that she is going to take these samples and create life. She snaps back, telling Grodd that what he's asking for is impossible. Her head begins to throb as she grabs it, and she hears his voice in her head, telling her that she will do as he commands. There is no breaking his will. He pulls out a vial in front of her, saying to himself that he's disappointed White Rabbit failed in bringing her to him sooner, as he begins draining the blood onto the table. He bends her mind, as her eyes become a greenish yellow as she puts her hands toward the pool of blood, with it swirling in the air. I calm back into Bruce, telling him that I've waited long enough, and he agrees, telling me to get in there. I get to the rafters, making my way above Grodd, and jump, slamming my foot down on his head. He stumbles back, saying that he knew Merlin did a sloppy job, but he didn't think it was this bad. It matters not, he says, as he puts his hand to his head. I pull out my sword, telling Grodd to stand down, as I won't hesitate putting him down like a stray animal. Grodd laughs, telling me that I have the same stubborn arrogance as my grandfather, the same that spelled his demise. I pull a batarang out of my utility belt, holding it in one hand as I grip the sword in the other. He goes on, asking if I'm even aware of the atrocities committed by my grandfather, especially concerning him. I ignore him, running at him until I get under his chest, slicing at his legs. He slams his fist down, missing me, but creating a crater where my head would be at. As he's trying to bury me into the ground, he explains that my grandfather tortured and experimented on him. The only one to ever show sympathy for him was Merlin, so he used that compassion to turn him against Raish. It was only a matter of time, especially when I came onto the scene, that the bad blood between them would come to a boiling point. It wasn't hard to manipulate Powers into funding a private army for his uses, and now that the girl's here, he can create his perfect army and have a home in the same land where he was persecuted, with it now being free. I tell him that he's insane and that he'll never let him manipulate anyone else again. He laughs, telling me that I'm just a bit too late for that. Plants start to crack the ground as they tear it apart and fly up. I look over to see Tara, standing with her eyes glowing green and her arms out as plants slither in, grabbing me and lifting me into the air. Bruce activates a feature on my suit that sets off a temporary spike in temperature, burning the plant. It drops me as I run to Tara, telling her to snap out of his mind control before taking the band off my head and putting it onto hers. Her eyes go back to normal as she looks into mine, but his mind control took effect on me immediately as I grabbed my sword and swung it at her. She used a branch to protect herself from my slashes, as she now pleaded with me, but knew that it wasn't going to work. Constraining me again, she began to fight Grodd, shooting spikes out of the branches that were sticking into him. She formed a plant into a club that she used to counter his punches while also delivering blows to him. Knocking his head enough times freed me of his mind control, and I ran over to help Tara, but was grabbed and thrown back by Merlin. He tells me that I got lucky that time, but this is the end of the line. I sheath my sword, gesturing for him to come up to me. He ran at me, jumping in the air and attempting to slam down on me, but I dodged his attack and grabbed him, slamming him down. We began to counter each other with ferocity and skill, as Tara and Grodd were battling with power, causing the facility to shake with force. Me and Tara looked at each other and switched fights, as I began to throw batarangs at Grodd and slice his arms and legs with the sword. Tara slammed down Merlin with a branch as he crumbled to the ground, defeated. Grodd tried to use his mind control again, but was taking a significant beating before he finally fell to the ground. I tell Tara to hold Grodd for a little longer as I went back to Merlin. I stood over him as his face was now covered in blood and his body was weak. I told him that I am the only one fit to lead the league, as I am relieving this traitor of his life. He looks up to me, telling me to at least send him out with honor. I tell him that traitors don't deserve honor, and swiftly cut off his head. Back with Grodd, as he is wrapped up by the plant, I stick my blade in his shoulder, marking him. I tell him that the atrocities that happened to him cannot be forgiven, but neither can his atrocities to the League be forgiven either. With that, I take the blade again, slicing his throat as he quakes to the ground. I then set the research lab on fire as I get Tara out of the burning facility. Back in the cave, the news was buzzing about the arrest of Wayne Powers' CEO Derek Powers by leading detective Richard Grayson for the charge of aiding and abetting terrorist activities. He's been found guilty of all the charges presented to him and will be locked up in the newly redesigned Arkham Asylum. In other news, there are some who believe they saw the Batman again after a long 3-year hiatus. Whether this is true or not cannot be determined at this time, but maybe Gotham can sleep safer knowing their savior is back. After I turned off the news, I looked to Tara, asking her what she'll do now. She confides in me, saying that she has nowhere else to go and wonders if she can stay here, learning from me. I tell her that I'm still learning this new life as well, but I can help her the best I can. She also tells me something else, saying that she has been having memory flashes lately. A woman with red hair and light green skin caring for her, but it fades in and out. She can't remember anymore. I tell her that now that my quest for vengeance has ended, I will help her look for this woman, find out where she really came from. She thanks me, saying that she finally has a sense of purpose in her life. Bruce calls out to me, saying that there's a break-in at Wonder Tower. I look to Tara, telling her that I'll be back as soon as I can, and head over to the display, suiting up. I look over to the camera feed of Wayne Manor, which is slowly being rebuilt as the community from the League now resides there. I then get onto the bike, flying out of the Batcave, heading out to protect my new home, Gotham City. My name is Damian Wayne, heir of Bruce Wayne, and I am the Batman. And that's the end of my story. Thank you all so much for watching. I know this one was a little bit out there, but I hope that you enjoyed the ride. What did you think of my story? Were you looking forward to this game when it was leaked, or are you glad Gotham Knights is coming out instead? Let me know all of this in the comments below. Also, I've started a Discord server called Rewriters Roundtable, where we discuss all topics involving video games, comics, TV shows, and movies. The link for that is in the description below. Also, if you're a fan of gaming streams, then feel free to check out my second channel, Rewriter Gaming. Link for that is also in the description below. If you enjoyed this video even in the slightest bit, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again, and this is the Rewriter, writing out.